Yebo. Okay, all right, everyone. Welcome to the Forest Brothers podcast. It's your boy Mutsa Christon Makufa, joined by my other boys here, Samson, Kosi, and we've got a very special guest, Mr. Nota, in the building. Gents, say hello to our people out there. Say what's up. We can start with our guest Nota, and then we can go to Kosi and Samson, and then we can get started on our conversation. It's over to you, Nota.
What's up, Forest Brothers fam? I am Nota, also known as The Authority, also known as simply Nsamlo Baloyi. You know, Mama's favorite. Yeah. How you doing?
I know we're chilling, Baba. We're chilling. We're all Mama's favorite here, I hope. Kosi, go ahead, Richie.
Sure thing. Hello to the Forest Brothers listeners out there. It's always great to be back. Today we have a special guest, Nota. Looking forward to the conversation, and I'd also like to take a moment here to greet my two fellow brothers here, Mr. Musa, as well as you, Mr. Musanga.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome to the Forest Brothers.
Yeah.
Oh, Samson.
Samson lost his head.
Yeah, he just lost us. We lost it. Anyway, he'll come back. He'll come back. It's fine. Anyway, I mean, this virtual technology and shit, but it's fine. So yeah, Nota, glad you joined us today. We want to chat to you today. I think this is always an important topic, but want to chat about just Pan-Africanism, Africa moving forward, and your thoughts on like just diaspora and things like brain drain. We're all from Southern Africa, well, except for Samson is from Kenya, but he spent a lot of time.
Southern and East Africa is one thing. Comesa, we're the same group of people.
Yeah, nah, you got it. You got it.
Yeah, actually, now Samson, that's your bag. Maybe just say a quick hello to the people so that it doesn't look like we ignored you.
Oh shit! Was I completely out?
My guy, you left us, my guy. You left us.
That's unfortunate. Anyways, hello, dear listener. Welcome to the Forest Brothers podcast. We're here once again with another illustrious guest, Nota. Welcome to the show. Hello to my two brothers, Mutsa and Kosi. Great to be here with you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Yeah. So one of the major reasons why I wanted to have you here, Nota, is because we know you are very well read, and we know you think about a lot of things. Sometimes people don't want to hear what you got to say, but we think we'll give everyone a fair shot on this podcast. So by all means, we're like, let's challenge this man, and let's also be challenged to think about what we as Africans can and should do better. So let's just get on to you. I mean, what are your thoughts on Pan-Africanism in general?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not too much of a believer in Pan-Africanism. As much as I am a believer in like blackness, which is something that I feel like we share, whether we're in Africa or not. Just coming from this mother continent, we share our blackness, and I guess it's a contemporary identity that has been created in the modern world and post-colonial world. But as far as African regions, I'm very much a believer in regionalism, because our continent is rather huge, even though the map suggests otherwise. Just looking at South Africa on its own, South Africa is actually quite big, even though it's comparable to some of the states in the United States, for the population that it has and the land mass that it has. It's actually quite big. And if you look at other neighboring states in Southern Africa, Namibia for one, it's gigantic, but has a very small population. Botswana as well, their population is minuscule. Zimbabwe as well doesn't have that much of a big population. Zambia, I think, is the only other country in Southern Africa that's got, in excess of, I think, 20 million people. And then you've got your East African countries, your Tanzania and DRC, which are the big population contributors to our region, because I guess they were both formerly part of Southern Africa.
Yeah, you bring up this idea of regions, actually. So maybe the first question I should ask you is, should we actually do away with these borders? Because, of course, as we all know, white people came in, drew those lines. And what does that meeting they had in Germany, and then they just sectioned Africa off back in the day.
The Berlin Conference.
The Berlin Conference, yeah, before they like when they first came, right? And they did all that. So is that something as the AU, should the AU actually be doing that? Like, yo, man, let's do away with these borders. Because as a Zimbabwean myself, we know the drama that happens between Zim and SA and like immigration. Should immigration even be an issue in Africa? Like, we should do away with that, right?
I mean, you can't do away with it if you still have an AU, because the AU was formed because of those borders, you know. So what constitutes the AU? Even the OAU, you know. So we need to go back to a stage which precedes that, where we had city-states and we had regions with different clans. We didn't really have tribes, but we had different clans, and there wasn't like a tribal identity as there is in Europe. You know, the French tried to create a French tribe, the English tried to create an English tribe, you know, amongst the many other tribes that are there. But here we had, you know, clans and families, and we were in smaller group settings with less conflict, and especially the southern region, you know. As soon as slaves started being owned within West Africa and East Africa as well, and then being traded on both those coasts, a lot of people migrated south, in a southerly direction to run away from the slave trade. So, you know, we are part of the free people, you know, who don't have a history of slave ownership or, you know, being slaves. The borders themselves, to do away with them, would mean, you know, we're erasing their erection, and we cannot erase the past of history that brings us to where we are today. So we need to find a way in which in the future we're going to manage our neighborly relations and our stately relations, because we have created certain nationhoods and identities based on that as well.
Okay. Samson, Kosi, do you have any questions about that, or just about regionalism and whether it should actually exist? And if we just like be able to free move, you know, like I can just move from Zim to SA, no issues. I can work. Because I mean, in Europe to do that, right? Like if I live in Germany and I'm German, I can literally go to Italy and I can work there, or I can go Belgium. It's not an issue. But in Africa, for some reason, you know, it is, right? Like I can't just go to Swaziland and work without a permit. But that's not an issue in Europe. And why can't we have that, right? Like, wouldn't that make us as a continent stronger? So maybe you two boys can also add something to that. But that's kind of where I was going with that, first of all.
Yeah, I think, Kosi, you can go.
Sure thing. Yeah, just on that, like the main idea on, I just get your opinion on is like the idea of like when you look at like driver's license, like a SADC driver's license or an East African driver, is that something that should be brought into one? Like that's the first piece. Same thing for the passports. Like, are we supposed to have like one passport if like we're still going to maintain these borders?
Yeah, I mean, we do already have one driver's license. Any driver's license that is recognized anywhere in the world is accepted in South Africa, for one. And I think I've used my South African driver's license in neighboring countries when I was driving there. So that is one way which is effective. And I know my delivery guys, a lot of them come from Zim and Malawi, and they use Malawian and Zimbabwean driver's licenses when they enter the estate where I stay. So for our region and to manage our regions, I think we just need to create a political identity for our young people going forward, you know, and think what type of region would we like to build. A region is more manageable than an entire continent because, as you would know, it's all about trading and money and development, and certain places have been stifled, or their development has been stifled, so that they're dependent on other regions for anything that they may need, you know, whether it be foods, whether it be certain implements, equipment to do production, agriculture, manufacturing, you name it, you know. So looking at that, we can't erase the history that has brought us to where we are. And we need to now find a way to forge a future where our development can be balanced. When you look at a city like Harare and a city like Bulawayo and a city like Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, a city like Mbambane or a city like Nairobi, there needs to be some level of development which is uniform in either of those cities so that they're not taking from one another, taking skills from one another, taking families from one another, taking resources from one another, just to enrich themselves. And that's a balance that we need to strike as a people. And it's something that needs us as the young people to decide on that, because the incumbents are just, satisfied with benefiting from the current status quo and dying with their riches, which they can't, take with them to the afterlife.
Yeah, I agree with that. This idea of regions and this idea of different regions kind of gauging each other and sizing each other up, saying, "Hey, you do that, so I'm going to do this, and then we're going to help each other in this and this way." I think that's very important. I was going to ask, like,
oh no,
Hey, Samson, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know. I don't know what going on with this.
he had a haircut.
Maybe this because he had a haircut. Maybe, but yeah, I find this even the chat about incumbents, right? Like people who hold power in like places like let's look at essay, right? Like this is probably gonna be controversial, but I like to think of myself as a controversial gent. So when we look at South Africa,
Hold
for
on.
example,
Wait, before you get into the controversy, let's let Samson get his thing in before
before we get into the meat. Okay, sure. All right, Samson, go ahead, my guy. You're back.
I have no idea what keeps happening, but where did I cut off?
Just start over.
You were saying the regions. You agree with the regions part of things and how to develop regions in collaboration.
Right. Okay. So I was going to say, we've spoken a little bit about colonialism and what it's brought. And, in my opinion, I think the biggest impact has been what it's done to languages and what's done to how we teach, like the young people moving forward in terms of, what languages need to learn or what subjects need to learn. It's all kind of rooted in colonialism or like the effects of it. So moving forward, what would you suggest? Other things we need to do from like an education standpoint to make sure that everyone is on the same page moving forward, like as a Black people. Like, what are those key things we should be teaching young people in schools? Whether it's a common language, whether it's these common languages, or it's these core subjects. In your opinion, like, what are those skills we should be transmitting?
Yeah, I strongly believe in language diversity. So having a common language is one thing, but I like to think that we should be teaching kids to at least have 4 or 5 different languages that they're proficient in or they're able to communicate in. I know that I'm at least proficient in 4 different South African languages, and I can understand and communicate in at least 6 or 7. So it's not really that much of a challenge to learn a new language and to learn from different language perspectives, because the way in which our languages are structured, the words that we use, also informs how we perceive the world around us. And having those different perspectives, because of how many languages I know, always helps me become more accommodating of different points of view as well. And that is something that we need to learn, because I feel like our political identity has been bludgeoned upon us, because of how the political identities in the West are structured. Most of them are either binary or, there's a fight between a certain duopoly with a third smaller group being the kingmaker in many instances, or there's a coalition of certain pacts of power that represents a certain type of political groupthink, and that is something that is not good for discourse. Number one, because for one point of view to prevail, the other needs to be demonized. And as soon as you've got demonization of certain perspectives and certain points of view, that coincides with the demonization of the groups of people that support those points of views. So you find us basically fighting each other and fighting amongst each other instead of learning from each other and seeing each other's perspectives. And that's something that I think is very Western, because Africans have forums where we caucus a lot and where people are given equal opportunity to, share their perspectives. And that is not how Westerners lead. They don't caucus a lot. They qualify certain people to have a right to engage in the politics of the day, and the quorum is limited to a group of elites that qualify for any number of reasons, whether it be what they bring to the table in terms of financial resources or a knowledge hegemony, where they keep certain information to themselves and allow others to be ignorant of how things work so that they can benefit themselves and exploit those with less knowledge.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know if Samson. I know Samson dropped off, so I don't know if he has a follow up to that. But I somewhat agree to that. Yeah, I do think there is like some, what can I say, benefit to the caucusing, maybe, because I think that the way the Western way is just having a select few making decisions, like they can be easily bought or whatever, right? But like if small people chatting about different things, then for sure, like maybe that is better. But I guess the question I have then, just moving on, like from that, is if we're talking about moving forward, right? Maybe I'll start less controversially than as controversial as I want to be. If we talk about moving forward, right? Let's look at like after apartheid ended, right, in SA, and we talk about how there were a select few who had all the resources, and of course, like the majority didn't. And we're talking about generational wealth. Like, for example, like a lot of the white people in SA have generational wealth because we're able to foster that. Like I remember in a previous episode, I saw you talking about Stellenbosch and all the people who've like gone there, graduated from there, and like just that, they put themselves in good positions to do well. And you see that in many places across the world, right? Especially in Africa. So, and then in Zimbabwe, we saw what happened when they took the land from the whites, and it was done in that fashion. So if we're talking about land in SA, I want to hear what your thoughts are when it comes to redistribution of land. Because I know, it's been talked about for sure for a lot of years, but I want to hear more about like, hey, we've been talking about this for decades, or at least since 1994 when independence took place.
Yeah, let me give you a controversial answer though.
That's what we want, Baba. That's what we want. But I think that. What?
It's all been a charade.
Really?
Yeah, the repression of South Africans, was to the extent that they were, in the main, politically inept. Political parties were banned until 1990. You need to understand that. So how did these political parties, number one, form structures and form leadership, in the space of 3 years, and then campaign for an election, which date is set before people actually agree to the election date, and have, threats of boycotts even prior to that election. So it's always been a charade. The ANC as a party itself, it's like its membership is completely non-existent. They bus in people to pretend as if they're delegates. They rig their own internal elections based on their internal party packs. I mean, I went to the ANC conference, I was there, and I could see that this is just a farce. These people that are sitting here behind this are just sitting here to make it look like there's something actually going on, to sing songs, but none of those people seem like they're actually branch delegates or that they've got any constituencies. So all of these political parties in South Africa are just pretending as if they exist, as a party, as if they've got memberships. But if you were to say, okay, show us your membership, like prove your membership, verify that your membership is made up of human beings, and then tell us what are the activities of each and every single member and how each of those members are given activities that are mandated and their performance based on the mandate that they're given. And none of those parties can show you anything for it. There's special or select leaders that, bring themselves to prominence for whatever reason, and they're chosen to lead. But what you've noticed is that, there's no constituencies. So prior to
Even
that,
EFF?
yeah, even EFF,
Okay.
even EFF. Yeah, I mean, they busing people to their rallies. That's it. But you don't see those people, you don't engage with those people in real life. Those people have no power. I mean, even if those were the people that are the common laborers and everything else in this country, a common laborer has no rights, has no power. They sit on the back of an open bakkie and go to work each and every single day, even though that's illegal, and no one stops the driver of that bakkie, and they get paid, below the poverty line, and no one bats an eyelid. They can't strike. A lot of the people, you look at our infrastructure, and our roads are built by people that are paid below poverty line, and they don't know any better because they're just making enough money to get food because they're in desperate situations. So this country keeps on exploiting people in desperate situations. It puts them in the belly of the earth, and when something happens or disasters happen, they do whatever they can to see if they can salvage anything, but they're not really making an effort to get people out of the ground at a cost which is much more than they would have ever paid for those people's labor and the value that they would have extracted from that.
Okay.
It's a farce, like completely and honestly, and totally a farce. The executive committees of these places, yeah, okay, fine, they've got some sort of duties to perform. That they're mandated to perform, but other than that, they're just putting as many of their most capable people in the seats to be lawmakers. But those laws are decided on by the internal party policies, and the policy makers are think tanks, which are provided by the funders of those political parties.
All right. Because you look like you had a question about that, or a comment.
Yeah, I did have a question just to follow on like how these like structures have been put in place from like back in the day. Like when we think about the youth now, the people that live in like the country, like what is the future like going forward? And like in your opinion, let's say tomorrow they're like, okay, now you're gonna lead the strategy going forward. Like there's a lot of people outside the country. Like I think for all three of us, like well, maybe I'd say we're contributing to brain drain. Like, is that also part of the problem on like we need to come back and essentially take these countries forward? Or is it more or less the people that are already there need to essentially start changing their mentality, or there has to be a change of power at like the top?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to delegitimize whatever power is there in the first place, because it's, it doesn't actually have a real constituency and shouldn't have power if it's installed. So, we live in a duality in a world that is controlled by either the CIA or the KGB. And when the KGB fell apart and the CIA became a hegemony from a deep state's perspective, they got to co-opt and buy everything. So in Kenya, you guys have got the Kenyattas who are given KFC, to sell chicken. So now they've got the rights to sell KFC all over Kenya, and becomes the biggest, fast food chain, and it's used to enrich certain people. In South Africa, we have like Cyril Ramaphosa, and the CIA gave him as an agent, McDonald's to run. and Coca-Cola to run. And he supplies the fountain Coke, at the McDonald's, which is one of the biggest fast food chains in the country. And because of that, he is able to then buy a constituency or buy his way into leadership within the ANC. And the ANC is seen as the party of Nelson Mandela. And therefore, other than the moral authority, it has struggle credentials and an advantage over the other competing parties. And that's why it has been ruling for so long, because people believe that it is their liberator. But the truth of the matter is that, the untenable situation that came from apartheid was actually defeated by sanctions. And those sanctions only fell after the Berlin Wall fell. So once the CIA, or the American hegemony, had decided that it had claimed a victory over socialism and capitalism, that's only when it was willing to, give democracy to its satellite states that waged proxy wars in contested territories, such as like Angola, where South Africa was engaged in war against the Frelimo rebels, which were supported by none other than Che Guevara.
So actually, I have also a follow-up question to that. So in a nutshell, are you saying that it is these large Western conglomerates that basically make things happen? Let's say in SA, you talk about McDonald's and how they gave Cyril Ramaphosa money and all this stuff. So is that what it comes down to, that these huge American and Western conglomerates are the ones controlling Africa just from the backside?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the Americans. The French do it as well with resources like oil. So they've got Total, which is also in the region. There's many others. The British do it through British Petroleum. And you would know how British Petroleum became the giants that it is. They basically removed the Shah of Iran and collapsed the last remaining Arab empire. And, that's how they've been able to expand all over the world. And companies like your Rockefeller, Standard Oil, Chevron, whatever, you name it, have done the same thing on behalf of the British after, the Second World War. Germany also has had its own influence. The military machinery helped them get an advantage in the motor manufacturing sector, and they use that advantage to basically, create these luxury car brand behemoths. Japan did the same thing with their military machinery and that's manufacturing. And once they were defeated or surrendered in the war, they were used as a territory that the Americans could colonize and use to stifle the development of China and give them a regional competitor in their former colonizer, because Japan at some point had occupied and colonized China.
Yeah, so how do you fight against that? Like, since we know about this, or you know about this, and now the people know about this, if you're to become president today, like, how do you fight against that? Like, Coca-Cola is out here running us around like with the puppets and all that. So how do you counter that?
Yeah, well, you need to counter and you need to remove the deep state. So the people that have that power, you need to be able to sabotage them. So you'd start your disinformation campaigns, you'd confuse their youth, you'd ensure that those empires collapse and implode internally. And then once they're collapsed and they've imploded internally, that's when you can build your own countering forces that can then take over once the hegemony has fallen and there's a vacuum or a leadership vacuum in terms of global geopolitics. And that is something that is a process, but the first thing that we need to do is destabilize the US hegemony and partner up with all enemies of the US hegemony. And by doing so, we weaken it and weaken its influence. And when we start seeing the last kicks of a dying horse, like we're starting to see now with the war in Ukraine, they're just flooding as much money as possible into a country they've got no interest in, other than the fact that that's where they used to launder some of their deep state money and their ill-gotten riches, and convert them into Ethereum or whatever it is else that they're converting them into.
I was going to take it back a little bit when you're talking about how unstable things are in South Africa with basically everything being a farce. You know, you have the EFF is a farce, ANC is a farce. I'd actually like to hear your thoughts about the DA, but
I think the DA is a farce too, but you're saying yes, since everything is a farce.
well, since everything is a farce, okay. My question is, so what's stopping a very radical, a very outside group from just rushing in and taking over? Because there are no real structures, like you're saying. You know, people don't really have constituencies. People don't really have people they're looking over. So what's stopping like some small person from just gathering a few people, and then that movement grows, and then you have these independent city states or actually new political organizations just form through these small collaborations throughout the country? Because like you're saying, it's a farce. No one's really there to do anything about it. No one's there to stop it, to quash it. So what's standing in the way of that?
Yeah, I think it's like our states have been very repressive. So the colonizers really did a good number, and they spent enough time repressing our own views and our identities, so much so that we ended up losing our identities, and we ended up losing, our political identities as well. And people are just satisfied with surviving. So majority of the people are satisfied with surviving, and those who are not satisfied with surviving see that that's the only way to survive. So they subject themselves to it because, if they decide to fight the system as it is and as it persists, they stand to lose a lot. And life is short in their perspective. They want to be able to enjoy the conveniences of not having to take leadership into their own hands. And that does open up a gap for the brave ones. I mean, look at a guy like Julius Malema. He didn't really have a constituency. He stepped out of the ANC, which was his constituency, and was able to establish and build a party, and now has been able to build somewhat of a constituency with his leadership group, and the fact that he's able to gain the votes of South Africans. Even the latest polls suggest that in the next election, his party might grow even more than they've grown in the past, and breach the 13% mark when it comes to total votes. So there is a gap and there is a space, and those people who are taking up that space are seeing progress. It's just that it takes time to build credibility with people. People need to see you doing that for a number of years, at least a decade, before they're willing to trust you with their vote.
Mm-hmm. Oh, actually, while you're on this topic of just like Julius and all these very interesting topics, what are your thoughts on the March 20th proposed national shutdown? And from your perspective, what's the trajectory of when you look at polls and numbers and stuff like that? Someone who's there on the ground, who knows the ins and outs. I don't know if you know the ins and outs, but somewhat of the political landscape on what 24 would look like for many South Africans, because right now there's quite a lot that's happening, and yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, again, like I said, they don't really have a real constituency. So this whole entire March the 20th thing is convenient because a lot of people will be taking a long weekend. They're going to bus in crowds, pretend as if, it was well supported, but most people are just going to be continuing with their lives as normal. And most people don't want to be bothered or subject to, marches, protests, or anything else. Every single protest that you see in South Africa is actually a crowd that is bussed in, and they don't even know what they're protesting about. But the protest leaders are there to speak to the media, and the media then amplifies whatever it is and makes it seem like people have grievances. But if we really had proper protests in this country, the protests would not be able to be captured in just a wide angle lens of a camera. You'd be able to see it from a helicopter, you know. So you don't see helicopter views of people protesting or marching or standing in opposition to anything like you do when you look at the protests that happen in Europe. You know, when people protest in Europe, you know, the pictures that you get of it are aerial pictures. You know, the cameraman can't even stand in the crowd and speak to people that are protesting in the crowd. There is none of this toying thing that you see. All of that is new. And that is, you know, the saddest part about it is that you see this thing on the news. Once you're there and you've seen it from the news camera's perspective, you know that all of it is fake. And you wonder why these journalists don't actually down tools and say, hell, hold on, all of this stuff is fake. We know what's going on. Let us put ourselves in leadership positions. Then it's because they're tied to their salaries, they're tied to their debts. And once you can have a population that is overly indebted and in need of any income to maintain those debts, you can make them do anything. I mean, Zimbabweans don't have that indebtedness because they don't have access to, you know, personal loans from their banks. You know, everything has to be bought cash. But because of their suffering and their lack of finances as well, you know, and inflation and how that's affected their trust in money. You know, they don't really trust that the money that they have in their pockets, you know, will buy anything tomorrow if they keep it in their pockets. So they just spend everything they've got. They don't save either way. So that creates the same problem of overly indebtedness, you know, lack of savings. And if you don't have savings, you cannot invest. And if you don't have anything that you invested in within your own country, you don't have anything that you care about. You don't see the effects of your taxes in the condition of the road, or you don't see the effect of corruption in the way in which your taxes don't end up fulfilling their purpose and helping to provide the services that are needed by the population. So there's like a cognitive dissonance and a general apathy to governance and the politics of the country at that time. Everybody's on their own mission. Everybody's standing in their, sitting in their own car, focused on driving on the road, you know, and ignoring other motorists as much as they can.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean that's true about Zim, right? Like just that the fact that the financial economy has been really destabilized. So it's hard to do that, to even make those investments, to make those actual progressive moves or whatever it is, or whatever it may be, because, and that of course makes a lot of people not engage in a lot of things, especially in the building of the economy. So I understand that as a Zimbabwean myself. So I think that part is very true. So I think I'll just be thinking about like maybe back to the land thing. If we're to like maybe for example, because you know a lot of African countries look at SA as South Africa is the biggest economy, right, in the world, and yet the poverty rate in the continent, right, and yet the poverty rate is really high, or like just unemployment in SA is really high, and that's due to a lot of factors. So why has it not been that if we're looking at farm grabs, or why is it not that like that distribution of land? If South Africa knows to be like, yo, we need to get our resources back, and then because the people are always bigger than the government, right?
Yeah. So they don't feel that they invested in those resources. So those are not their resources either way. Only the politicians are saying, hey, let's get our land back. And these people don't actually believe it's their land. You know, they want to believe that's their land because they think that they might stand to benefit. But if you look at whether they actually believe in the land as a utilizable resource, they don't believe in it like that. And also as Africans, we don't believe in ownership of land. I mean, how can you own land if you're going to be buried beneath 6 feet of it when you die? You know,
okay.
You know, so we don't have that concept. So for us, land is just something that is supposed to be utilized for a certain or particular purpose. And when it cannot serve that purpose anymore, we move to other lands, you know. That's why we've been migrating the whole entire time, moving to greener pastures. And that's a way of life that was interrupted by colonialism. And then we were then thrust into now having to work for the colonial masters. And that's when unemployment actually became a problem. is that if you are not working for the colonial masters, you're now unemployed and you are othered. And that sort of criminalizes you in a place where they've got areas where people who don't work there or who are not serving a certain master in that area cannot be in that area or live in that area, whether or not they're, traditionally from there or their families are from there. And the movements of people being controlled by the fact that they work for the hegemony or not, then ties them to work, then ties them to employment, and they identify themselves as employees rather than human beings. And without employment, they don't have any identity. And without any identity, they cannot fight for anything because, they don't see themselves as whole beings, that have needs, that have requirements, that have demands, that have rights. And some of those rights are a right to, work the land and live off of it.
Yeah. Here's my thing. In my opinion, if we're trying to talk about Africa moving forward and all the things that we've talked about today in terms of like those things that you're saying, Nota, and like some of the things we've discussed, for me, at the end of the day, all these people are here because they know that we have everything we need. Like, right? Like Black people and Africa has all we feed the world. The world needs Africa more than Africa needs the world, in my opinion. And so if we're to take the stance as a population and as a people to say, actually, the world cannot function. If you look at chocolate production, cocoa, like 99% of cocoa comes from West Africa. But then you see that the manufacturing of it and all that happens in Europe. That's where the money's at, right? And the farmer in Congo is getting like $1 or less than $1 a day or a week for their work that they do. But yet they're the ones out there holding this resource, the raw material, right? So if we're to take a stand and say, you know what, we don't want to do that anymore. We're closing Africa off, and y'all will pay us what we want. And then like if the white people, the powers that be want to remain in Africa, we chase them out, or we do whatever we can to fight them and let them bounce, because at the end of the day, they need us, right? And as you're talking about the deep state, the CIA for sure has been like messing things in Africa for a long time because of oil, for example. You said in Nigeria, I said that with even Patrice Lumumba and all that stuff. So if you're listening to this, you need to know that you have, Africa is Wakanda, if I want to put it in layman terms. So that's how I see it. But it's not like just mobilizing the people to believe that. Like, we are not lesser than, we are greater than, but because of that, they're trying to hold us down to make it seem like we don't know what we're doing or whatever and all that. So that's my opinion on that. And it's just trying to engage the masses. So for someone like you, maybe not to you've got an influence and you've got resources more than the average person might have in South Africa and in Africa in general. It's like, up to guys like you to make that happen, right? Or at least teach the masses. I mean, I don't know if you agree with what I'm saying, but that's kind of what I think about our situation. And just like the effects of colonialism. Because now you see, like me and Kosi Sampson, we're not in Africa right now, right? And
but how old are you guys? I'm 32 right now.
Yeah, I'm 28.
Okay, so we're in the same youth age group, So it's incumbent upon us to take this up because we're the generation that is not the lost generation. Our parents are a confused generation. Our grandparents are a lost generation because they're the generation that completely lost their values and their traditions, and their identity, and started working for the hegemony, and then started thinking that our education, which is being trained to be in service of the hegemony, was something that we should be proud of attaining because it gave us an identity, it gave us a purpose in life, when that isn't the case. And then they passed that down to our parents, who then went on to educate us so we can work for the hegemony. And now you find our brothers and sisters, working all over the world for that same hegemony and not being able to contribute materially to the development of their own home countries because they're busy trying to survive in the hegemonic capitals of the Western world. And the little that they're able to spare then goes into ensuring that those they've left behind at home can survive, where the hegemony has dominated and colonized their people, chased them off their lands to such a point that they are not even tied to the land from which their ancestors were raised. And that is a problem that our generation now has to fight. We need to ensure that, we're teaching our children about their value. We're teaching our children about their history, because we can research that history now. We can find out who we are. We can find out our identity, and that information can't be kept from us any longer. And that's why we need to be creating platforms where this knowledge is shared, where these conversations are had, so that the caucus can then move the youth forward. So what we leave behind is a generation of people that will ensure that the sacrifices that their ancestors made are not in vain. I think that's the one thing. And then also, like, give up the status of being accepted by the hegemony. That's the one thing. It's like, oh, I'm an accountant, I work at Ernst & Young, or whatever the case may be. That can't be a badge of honor. Or I went to Oxford University, or I went to Yale or Princeton or Wharton Business School, whatever the case may be. That can't be a badge of honor to us. Yes, you might go to these institutions, but what should be a badge of honor is how many young Africans you've freed from, the hegemony, how many young Africans you've empowered to be able to defeat this hegemony. And that's how we should be measuring our success or our failures as well. Just in the same way as Nelson Mandela could say his success was basically steering South Africa to a point where it could have a democratically elected leadership, even though there's no such thing as democracy when people are not educated or don't even know what options they have when it comes to which parties represent them and their needs and desires. They don't even understand party manifestos, never mind understanding that politics is not anything more than a popularity contest in its current state, and that challenge is something that we can overcome by having more and more of these discussions, recording them, sharing them, using the internet. But what we will face is that our challenge is that they will suppress these conversations and they will suppress these dialogues, and they're more inclined to create synthesized virality for things that serve them.
Yeah, we're gonna give you the floor to ask us any questions that you may have, Nota. But my final thing on this is that I know in the previous podcast you were on with DJ Smooth and all those guys, you're talking about the fact that you brought up the point that in South Africa there are no Black-owned or Black-started universities. I know you guys are talking about post-education and everything. So isn't that one of the ways to fight the hegemony? Like, I know that there are a lot of millionaires and a lot of billionaires that are South African, and starting a Black-owned university should not be something that's too difficult. I mean, if Oprah can come to South Africa and start a school for girls, I know that there are a bunch of South Africans who've got money to do that too. So why not start there?
That's the thing. We don't actually have money. Money is not our invention. So whatever it's used for cannot be, counter to its purpose. It's a means of trade. It's a means of exchange in this hegemonic structure, but it cannot be used for us to invest in ourselves. You use money to buy land. We don't believe that land can be bought. We don't believe there can be tenure. We don't believe that there can be deeds. We don't believe that one can have rights over land. So now when you subject yourself to this monetary system, you're subjecting itself to all its trappings as well. And you don't need money to start institutions of learning. You just need a commitment to discovery, to a commitment to scientific rigor. And once you've got that put together, these are the knowledge systems that we already had originated within the continent, and you strip away the need for money to facilitate that entire process, that's when you can actually then start making progress. So that starts with building communities and better families. So if the family becomes the knowledge system, if the family becomes the education system, and it's about passing down knowledge throughout the family, and the kids grow up like that, and then these kids then also contribute to the community by educating one another about what they've been taught within each of their families, that's when you can then have knowledge systems that supersede what we have currently in the schooling structure and in the university education system. Because that education system is to serve the hegemony. You're trained to be an accountant so you can work for KPMG or any one of the big accounting firms. You're trained to be a banker so that you can work on Wall Street, and you can eventually end up at Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, whatever the case may be, and those systems are there to ensure that you are able to serve the capitalist hegemony. But once we actually go back to our roots and look at Africans and our culture and see how that culture can still have scientific rigor while not being Western, that's when we can have a hope of educating our own children without using the master's textbooks.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, did you have any questions for us, Nota? Because we don't want it to seem like we're barraging you with questions, Yeah,
no, I mean, like, how was your experience of being outside and obviously overcoming the guilt? Every time you guys eat, you think of all the African brothers that you've left behind that can't have the burger, and you feel like you want to spit it out.
I don't know. Okay, for me, I don't know if I have, did I feel guilty? Sometimes you do, but you know what? Like, it's a lot. Like, coming to the United States is a lot in general because, like, coming from Southern Africa, you don't think about race. Like, you do, but it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm a black man or whatever. Then you come here and you realize there's a whole other history of what being black means, and now you have to change your mindset to like, yo, I need to figure this out first. So, and then you get lost in the hegemony as you're talking about. Like, okay, I need to do well in college. I need to get a job. I need to like stay in this country or whatever. And then it's like, okay, but I want to make sure that life back home is also like, I wanted to work in economic development so I can come back and like, but development work is very white. It's another section of colonialism, right? And that's why now I'm not really trying to be a part of it anymore. But I've spent like the last 7 years of my life in that. So now it's like, I need to get myself out of that. So, and I'm trying to, but it's hard as well because now we know like what the state of things are in our home countries, right? It's not easy. I'm just a man at the end of the day, right? I also have to eat. My family's got to eat, So it's like community over individual. That's what it kind of means. But I could do more, but can I? So that's my personal.
So you feel you should be doing more, but can you?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if I want to say I'm making money, like I'm making dollars, and it's cheaper for me to send like maybe 10 kids to school in Zimbabwe or something like that. Like I can maybe pay for a primary school or high school, and I can't, then it's like, okay, now what next? Now, okay, they have to go to college. Like, where do they go? Am I paying for that as well? And then like, how far do I take it? Sometimes it's cruel, right? To like pay for kids' fees and then you're not fully invested in the long term. Like, how far are you gonna get them, right? And I don't know how far my resources are. It's not like I'm a millionaire, I'm also just trying to pay rent, trying to make savings, trying to buy a house, and then so it's just like, what can I actually do? So it's trying to work through that.
Mm-hmm. Samson?
Yeah, for me, it's I guess I don't think about it much. Maybe that makes me a terrible person, but I don't know.
You're killing people.
Man, I don't know what to say, man. But what I can say, it's really made me look at the big picture. Because at the end of the day, when I look at life here, I look at life back home. I don't really see it as, there's Americans exploiting Africans or Chinese people. Like, I just see it as there's capitalism and there's like socialism. Those are the two dominant forces, right? In East versus West. And it seems to me in the West, people are still being exploited. Like my white neighbor has to go to work, has to, basically not live check to check, but like they can't make the decision to stop working without a plan B. Like they have to go to school, they have to go to work, they have to put that down payment on the house, they have to do that. But like with them, it's sort of different because they do all that with the security of, oh, if I do this, I can have this standard of life. I can live in this sort of neighborhood, get one car, send my kids to college because of the history we have, the generational wealth we have. In Africa, it's a lot different, where it's like, yes, you do all that just to survive. I will go to school for 7 years. I'll go get a PhD, get a master's, just to do the bare minimum. Like my dad did most of that. He didn't get a PhD, but he got a master's, and he was just barely able to put all, me and my siblings through school, and just able to buy a plot of land in his hometown to start a farm. I think he's owned 2 cars properly his whole life. One of them was an old beat up Suzuki from the 80s. The second one is the car he drives now, and he mostly uses on the farm. So he's just about to be able to make it, basically having done something that is a given for most Americans. So I think,
and it's ordinary for most Africans.
Yeah. So it's just like, that's just why it's like there's this capitalist structure, this Western way of living that has been created that I think at the end of the day does serve the top, the people at the top the best, and everyone else, it doesn't really, cater to them. But it's just, there's that structure and people are just trying to find their way within it, trying to find their best way to get by and to live within that structure. So, and at the end of the day, that's kind of what we're doing too. But the challenge is now how to break free, how to do something different, how to cheat the system, how to game it somehow, and make your own way. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd pretty much just say, like, in terms of like the experience side, it's been a lot of adaptation, firstly. And as Samson mentioned, just to touch on that, I think that now over the years, like you've actually like seen the big picture, and you start to reflect on some of the things that you've done. And for me personally, like when I look at it, it's all about just giving back to pretty much the people that have brought me to where I'm at here today, because those are people that you don't neglect. I think family for me like is a huge important aspect. Like start with them, and then whatever the dollar that I have that I can stretch, how far I can go, it's pretty much that I can use to help my fellow African brothers, because I do have fellow African brothers that I do communicate with on a regular cadence. So I think it's important that I also give back to those people because they also contributed to where I'm at. I think that's like the biggest piece for me. Is like, as much as you've helped me, like I'm gonna definitely repay that favor.
Dope.
Yeah. So, Nota, you say we should feel guilty.
No, most of the people that I've encountered in the diaspora do feel guilty. Like they could be doing more, and it's like, Dad, you're trying to save a continent. You're just one person. Relax.
Yeah.
Not to say that one shouldn't contribute to their home, and but this needs to be a collective effort. All of us need to be a part of it, especially as the young people, because the incumbents are benefiting from the current status quo. We cannot ask our parents who are bludgeoned over their heads, since birth, like literally, to free us. They're brain damaged. You know what I mean? Our parents all suffer from, political CTE, and they've never played American football. But if you were to do brain scans on them, I'm sure you'd be able to find some sort of noticeable difference between them and us, and the damage that their conditioning has done to the way they think.
I mean, all of us, right? We all have some trauma from even like indirect trauma. And I don't think that's widely talked about like what you're talking about. Like our parents do have trauma that they've accumulated from that, right? From that history that has been passed down from generation to generation. And the same way that trauma in America with the Black Americans can be seen, trauma with Africans is probably even more because we've gone through it longer, right? And it's like we don't really know what that looks like, but we see how it plays out. So I guess that's also true. I know Samson. Yeah, Nota, we're not gonna hold you on for too long anymore. I know you're having fun here.
No, I am having fun, you know.
Changing gears here. Maybe this may be the last couple of conversations. What's the biggest misconception about Nota that you think's out there that you were like, yo man, people would always be talking this about me, and I feel like, yo man, simply ain't true, and like people need to like, or because like, you know, you are a controversial figure, and I know you know that, and
yeah.
And I know that, you know, I like to say controversial things. I know we ride on that thing as well. Like sometimes I just want to say some crazy shit just to like ruffle some feathers. That's the kind of person I am. So maybe it's because of the freckles, because me and you both have freckles. So maybe it's like this freckles thing that makes us crazy. I don't know what it is, man. But
well, I mean, freckles mean you get teeth, so you get a thick skin. So when you've got a thick skin, automatically you are willing to say certain crazier things because you've heard so many crazy things said to you, and you've been told not to let them affect you. And then you get surprised when people let the slightest thing affect them. It's like, whoa. You know, it's like, yeah. I don't know if you were teased about your freckles, but I was.
And you know what? Funny thing is, I wasn't. That's the thing. Like someone might say like tea bags here and there, but to be honest, in general, I've not really been.
Yeah, but that's teasing, bro. That's teasing. But
yeah,
the thing is that you never punched someone for teasing you about your freckles.
No, I can't say I've been mad about it.
That something someone could say would offend you to the extent that you'd want to punch someone. So you don't understand when someone says, you know what? I can't believe that guy said that. I just want to punch him in the face. And you're like, hold on.
I mean, I guess people have different responses to different things, right? I mean, I'm sure there's something that someone would say to me that I'm like, yeah, I need to punch that motherfucker in the face. I'm sure there's something like that. But,
you ready?
I mean, I guess it depends. Like, if someone was to say something crazy about my mom or something, then maybe I'll be like, yo, what are you saying? Or like, you know.
Yeah, but even so, now you tell your mother that you punch someone in the face because they said something about you. Like, is your mother going to feel like you've defended her honor, or is she going to feel like you've got your family name to disrepute? You're fighting in the streets.
I mean, I suppose not, because I mean that's the thing, right? I mean, violence is never the answer at the end of the day. Right?
That's my thing. My mother's like that. My mother would be like, never fight because someone insulted me. Like, what? Are you going to become an animal because someone insulted me? Like,
yeah. So that's so. Oh, yeah. So that's what I was asking you. Like, so what do you think some of these biggest misconceptions about you are, if you know any?
Yeah, I think those are some of the misconceptions. You know, that I'm controversial or stuff like that. You know, I'm actually very conservative and traditional. It's just so funny that in this liberal world, or this world that we're trying to, you know, enforce liberalism upon people. By the way, I've got 3 minutes of electricity left. You know.
What, is there a timer? Is there a timer about like, yo, electricity about to go out in 3 minutes? Get ready.
So yeah, no, I got a message telling me that they're gonna cut the power at 10 p.m. this time.
SA is a tough place, man. They tell you they're about to cut it off.
Yeah, so 3 p.m. EST, we've got. So I mean, but other than that, you know, I'm quite a generous person. That's it. Like I'm quite a generous person. I give a lot of my time. I give a lot of, like, you know, listening to people, hearing them out. You know, not even to give them advice, but just to listen. Just to say, oh, okay. You know, I spend a lot of time doing that. It's just that the people that I do it with usually are troubled, or they don't even have like cell phones or have internet profiles. Like, you know, the guys at the filling station. I don't know. You guys don't have people at your filling stations apart from the Mexicans that work inside the store, you know. But the guys that fill fuel, like, I usually sit with them, and they'll be telling me, "Oh no, so and so, this happened, and then we were partying last weekend, and then my friend got arrested, and he's been in there." you know, when we didn't have bail money, so I had to spend the whole weekend in the cells and stuff like that. And I'd just be listening, you know. But it's not like those people are the type of people that will be, you know, on social media like, yo, I had this long conversation with this guy, you know.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the misconception of me. And that's obviously created by people who are upwardly mobile and out there. So, you know, they don't represent what the true essence of, you know, my personality is. Anyway, I feel like I've been, you know, severely mischaracterized. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to get that out there because I feel like everyone has to say it. People have to say what they say. But anyway, Nota, we really appreciate you being here. I don't want the part to go out before we say thank you for joining us on the podcast today. He was generous with his time. So as you can see, it's not like we paid, like, you know, we didn't like pull Nota from wherever it was and say, Nota, come on the podcast. You know, we just reached out to him, asked, and he's here. So really appreciate you taking the time to be
Thank
here.
you. I'm sorry about yesterday because I was trying to connect with my mobile and I only discovered once I was trying to connect at the time. Oh, damn it, you can't connect with the mobile. And I had no power at that point in time because I was actually at a restaurant.
That's so good.
With their Wi-Fi, and I left my laptop at home, so there was no hope.
No, it's so good. No, I appreciate you like just even coming back and saying, "Yo, man, what's happening today?" So we just want to say thank you that you joined us. We are a soccer podcast. So just a quick, what team do you support, Nota?
I'm a Ghana, you know.
Yeah, wow. You know, we shouldn't have done this part in the first place. What are we doing?
No. Relax. The Gunners are not going to do anything to you. We're harmless.
Man says we're harmless. You know, maybe we'll have you back actually for a soccer podcast because, you know, we want to actually, people never hear about you supporting a team.
If we are top two this season, have me back. I'm just gonna say that because I don't want to jinx anything for the Gunners. So if we're top two this season, you know, that's a win for me.
You know what? That means I'll be very happy if I don't see Nota back on this podcast. That's what that means. I never want to see you back here again, Baba.
No, man, it's been 19 years since the Invincibles, at least, you know, something.
Nah, FA Cup is enough.
Okay, what do you guys support, each of you?
I'm a Spurs supporter, so you can see.
Tottenham Hotspur, okay, cool.
Chelsea.
Who?
He's Chelsea.
Of course, it's Chelsea. Arsenal is Arsenal, yeah.
Oh, yeah! Okay, my fellow Ghana.
But Nota, you know what? By all means, feel free to come back if you want to talk soccer, man. We're always chopping it up about soccer.
I'd love to chop it up, but my little brother's the soccer expert, so let me just watch a little bit more because I haven't had time to actually follow the season. And once I've watched a bit more, then I'll be comfortable to speak. Because when you're speaking about soccer and it's going to be on the internet, dude, I don't want to be.
I never thought you were afraid of anything, Nota.
Hey, I'm afraid of football hooligans.
No, that's fair. Well, no, thank you so much, man. We appreciate you, and we'll definitely try to have you on another episode, talk about soccer, whatever it is. We'll definitely appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Ngozi Samson, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, let's contribute to building a better Africa than our parents left us.
No, thanks. All right, listen. Well, I guess
let's do it for them.
Let's do it for them. Yeah, exactly. Ngozi Samson, any words that you have?
Thank you for coming on and sharing your views. Sharing your opinions. We appreciate you taking the time, man. And hopefully we get to see you here when we celebrate Arsenal lifting the Premier League. I'm not afraid to say. I'm going to say we're going to lift it. I'm not afraid to say it.
Okay. I received. I'm leaving it at that. My dad is a big Manchester United supporter, so like I know he's going to his shaman, he's going to his sangoma, he's doing everything to.
We just released the Manchester United episode. Paul just went. Okay, excellent. But yeah, I know it's the slow shedding thing is deep, huh?
It is deep.
My God, this thing is very deep. But yeah, so listener, I know we've lost our brother the Nota, but like I'd also like to thank him for coming onto the podcast, and also tell our listeners out there that we're always back, we're always here. So don't you worry, Forest Brothers is always here.
First, this is always here. Thank you, Mangoro. Thank you, Samson. Listen out. Make sure we did a message episode previously to this one or whatever. So if you wanna hear back some of our stuff, make sure you go back. Follow us on Instagram at the Forest Brothers Podcast. We're there. We're on Twitter as well. We just do like at Forest Brothers. You find us on Twitter. You know, you can catch all our episodes on all platforms: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever. So. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. We are here. So yeah, and thank you so much. And yeah, we appreciate Nota being here. You might see him back, but if you don't see him back, just know Arsenal didn't win the league, which is great. So we can we can leave it at that. Thank you so much, listener, and we'll catch you next time.